Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show for real estate realities for the Coffee and Real Estate live chat. We're just getting going here. Going to check everything out, make sure things are going. I'm going to go ahead and kick off the pre-show for Facebook. Everything's looking good. Let's check it out on the other spaces here. I hope everyone's having a great Father's Day weekend. I'm going to be spending some quality time with my kiddos tomorrow and my dad. Let's check it out. All right, YouTube's working just fine. LinkedIn is acting like the stream has not started yet, which doesn't surprise me. LinkedIn is always so janky. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Oh, okay. LinkedIn actually doesn't let it start till the scheduled time, so we'll have to check that later. And then we can check it on X or Twitter, whatever you prefer to call it. Does not seem to be loading too well on Twitter. Let me try going to my profile. Yeah, it's showing up on my profile just fine. All right, we'll call it good. Facebook's looking good. Everything's looking good. So welcome to the pre-show. If you've got any questions, feel free to share them in the chat. I do have the Facebook chat up and also the chat that connects me to YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. So I will see your comments. And of course, anyone who's watching the video stream will be able to see them show up on the screen, except for Facebook. Facebook won't post to the stream, but that's fine. Facebook is the one that's more in my face, so I should be able to see those and respond. So feel free to ask any questions. One other thing that's going on this weekend right now, my oldest is in Houston looking for an apartment for his classes that start at University of Houston Law School in August. So very proud of him. He's out there with his mom looking for an apartment. Mom is going to handle mom is from that area, so knows the area pretty well. So it made sense for her to sort of be the guide on looking through Houston. And then I'm going to be the one responsible for getting him or helping him get to Houston. He's a grown man these days, but I always like to chip in and help when I can. So we'll road trip out at the end of July or beginning of August and get him all settled. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to that. I always like a good road trip. And speaking of road trips, something we can chat about is my trip I took last weekend to the southwestern area of Nevada. This is sort of the Carson City Valley area, particularly southwest of that town. Some just amazing areas. You know, I had some interesting feedback from people before I took the trip, right? Impressions that people had about the area. And man, it is a huge difference. So the first day I was there was Saturday morning, obviously. I left super early, got there at around 10 a.m., 9 a.m., something like that. And started looking at houses, started going to open houses and just doing drive-bys of other homes. And, you know, I was, as a Californian, and obviously this is my bias, it's just a little less green, right? You start to get to the point, particularly when you're looking in Gardnerville, which is south of Carson City, but literally, I mean, if you're someone from the Bay Area, the distance between Gardnerville and Carson City is a handful of minutes. It's nothing, right? It's almost like going from one neighborhood to another. And it's that feel, right? The vegetation sort of starts feeling more like a desert kind of a thing, the desert type stuff. But the views are still amazing. And what I wanted to do was sort of get some ground truth, get a feeling for what do I like, what do I not like. And it's good that I went, because my search for a potential property had really been focusing on Gardnerville, Minden, that southern area. And while that's a very beautiful area, if you're someone who wants a little bit more green, you really only need to go west, like to Mottsville, Sheridan, Genoa, everything west of the 395/88. And I realize I'm using area. You know what? I could actually show this to you on the stream here if you like. Let me just get that going. All right. So let me go ahead and share the browser. And there you go. So that's kind of the area. If I zoom in a little bit, you can see we've got Carson City right here. We've got Genoa here. And Genoa, I guess, is a nice historical kind of place. It's the first settlement in Nevada, which is kind of interesting. But you can see we've got Tahoe right here. And we've got the name of this road is Jack's Valley Road. And what I did is I decided to turn off the 395 and start heading a little bit more west. And I wanted to see what I was in for. And as I looked at properties here, and this is where I spent a good chunk of time, I was looking at properties here, I was looking at properties along here. What I found was that this dividing line really separates between feeling like you're in desert scrub brush and feeling like you're in green fields, kind of a thing. There's actually lots of agriculture here, lots of farms growing wonderful stuff. But boy, was this amazing in terms of just being scenic and amazing and beautiful. This whole area was really stunning. So if you're someone who's looking to relocate, and one of the reasons I went was relocation thoughts. This is as close as you can get to California and still potentially be within a relatively easy drive of anyone you might be leaving behind in California. And that's kind of my thought. I still have parents living in the Bay Area. So if I wanted to relocate and sort of leave California behind, this felt like a good option. Now, I'd looked at places in other areas. I've still got areas I think are super interesting, like southern Idaho and areas around there. But I thought this was an interesting trip to take. And when I did my viewing of this area here, I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm just not sure that this is where I would want to settle long term. And there was a whole... Now, one thing about the Gardnerville, Minden, this whole area here, man, do they have tons of events. This is a huge draw. They had some sort of a marathon going on. I'm not sure if it was I think it was a small marathon, like either a half or a quarter marathon, but all kinds of stuff. I think it was Valley Days was going on, all kinds of stuff. So in the morning there was lots of traffic. This is one of those towns where tourism is the thing. So I ended up staying, and I thought this would be a huge pain in the butt. So I couldn't find any hotels down here once I got there. This was almost an impromptu sort of thing. But when I ended up finding a hotel up here in Carson City, and literally the drive was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. I don't recall what it was, but it was nothing. So I ended up staying in a hotel. Aside from the real estate agent that I encountered down here at an open house, every single human being I encountered in Carson City was a former California resident. One of them had moved out of California 20 years ago. One of them had moved out of California 3 years ago. But these were all the folks who were sort of taking care of the hotel that I was staying at. And had a great conversation with them. And I just sort of asked them, give me an idea. What are some of the more desirable areas? And universally, they talked about Genoa. And yes, once you get to Genoa, it definitely has that sort of vibe. Lots of golf courses. I was checking out homes here. There's a bunch of homes for sale there. In fact, we could even look, if we want, at what listings are there. But here's the thing. If this is where you want to go, the price of your home suddenly takes a big jump. I think the average sales price in here in this area is $1.2 million. So, and the average price over here is like $600,000, $500,000, something like that. But the views here are stunning. If you're someone who's looking at, and I work from home predominantly, right? But if you're someone who's looking for a view, no matter which way you're facing, anywhere along here is a stunning view. If you've got a view to the east, you have this entire valley where it's a view across the valley to mountains over here, right? All along here. If you've got a western view, it's all the eastern slopes of the Sierras, and it's stunning. It's really amazing views. So it's hard to lose, and plus you're going to get more green, and my understanding from locals is that there's a little bit of a rain shadow that happens here, so you get a little bit less of it. I would imagine there's still snow. You're right there next to the mountains, and you're obviously not terrible. Obviously, the elevation here is much different. But I think this is a great option, and you can find things here too, but again, the price ranges go dramatically up from there. So just an interesting option. In fact, let's go ahead and let's go with Zillow, since everybody, I think my Zillow or myrealtor.com gives me a like things only realtors see kind of a thing. But here you go. I mean, you can see here what we've got in terms of prices. We've got 250. I think this is set up for everything. Yeah, so even land. So if we just look at houses, 1.75, 850,000, 1.69, 3 million. And I did look at a few of those. Any of the ones that have hearts are ones I was actually able to look at. But if you then scoot over here, you can see suddenly you're down around 800,000, 600,000, 500,000, 90 million. That must be for all that acreage. 720, 560, you get a little bit more. But if you look at these, I don't think this one has any views. But see, and here's another thing to think about. Even if you're doing this as an investment, let's say this is something you want to do as an investment. And I think given the number of people I saw there as tourists, I absolutely think you could vacation rental something here. But you need to focus on why would people come here. And one of the reasons why they would be not just getting access to the tourist stuff that's nearby, which is obviously important. But if you've got that edge of also having amazing views, right, where the natural beauty is really right there in front of your face, it's hard to argue that your home would rent less. And that's it. It always stuns me when nobody puts in photos of what views might be there, which tells me either there are no views or this agent just, for some reason, didn't decide to do that. But for this elevated price, I'd expect to see a great view to the west, but maybe not. But let's go ahead and look at one of these. This is one I looked at. I'm trying to remember. So this one's on a golf course, if I remember. Yes, this one's on a golf course. And funnily enough, this is another one where I don't think the photos do the view justice. Everyone's going for you back up. This right here is your porch for this one, but take a look at that. I mean, that's just remarkable. This one does have an HOA, and I'm not a huge HOA fan. But the HOA was $150 a month, so that's not bad. So, and this is bordering, just this way is where the golf course is. But you've got this giant back porch. And see what they gave me photos of the porch in every direction but the one I want, right? I mean, if I was just Joe Buyer, the dazzling view would be completely unnoticed. This one needs a little love on the inside. Most of the carpeting is bad. But see, there you go. You get a feeling for what that view is right there. But it is an expansive eastern view. Look at that. Just gives you, it's really amazing. And because you're at a higher elevation, that view is never going to go away. No, nothing is ever going to interfere with that view. Just amazing to me, the decisions that get made on photos. But anyway, see, you can kind of get a feel for it here. But anyway, I kind of liked that one. A little bit too neighborhoody for me. But if you go back here and then do something more along the lines of lot size and go for an acre, obviously we're now talking $3 million, and that's a little bit more than I'm willing to spend, frankly. And even this one doesn't have the most spectacular views, but man, that is a beautiful house. But just some amazing east and west views. Man, that is some rustic, western-looking stuff. All right, we have hit 10 o'clock. Look at that. I was just gabbing away, not even realizing what I was doing here. Welcome to it, everyone. My name's Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker right here in Santa Clara County. I've been doing this since 1988, so it's been a long time. This is a monthly get-together that we have where we chat about what's going on with local real estate, what news items might affect us directly, what changes are happening. We've talked a lot about the NAR settlement, the National Association of Realtors settlement, which is going to impact buyers in a giant way. We may touch on it a little bit today. We may not, but there will be a new podcast. Now, if the podcast is something that interests you, you can find that at my website at soldbyrobert.com, or you can go to therebelbroker.com. Rebelbroker.com is a direct link right to the podcast. And if you go to soldbyrobert.com, there's a link at the top that just, or a menu item that just says podcast. And if you click it, you'll be able to select between the web page or the various ways you can consume it. And of course, that's available on all the outlets, whether we're talking iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Google Podcasts, which I think is going away, Radio Public, TuneIn, Podbean, Stitcher, or you just want an RSS feed. All of those are available. I like to call it a weekly show, but to be honest, it hasn't been. Things have just been too crazy. I haven't really had time to do a podcast in a while. The last post for one was last month, I think, or earlier this month. But I'm trying to get back into the regular routine of doing it. It's just that when the time comes, some other real estate related thing jumps in and stops me from doing it. But we've got plenty of topics to hit in the podcast. I try to keep those focused on buyers, sellers, and investors and what you guys need to know. So you can check out the last one, which actually is discussing the National Association of Realtors settlement. Back then, that was all going to go into effect in July. Now it's going to go into effect in August. And the next show is probably going to be directed at buyers and how to find your next home without committing to a real estate agent too early in the process, because there's going to be huge pressure from real estate agents to get a written commitment from buyers before they'll even show you a house. They won't, when we get to August, they're not going to show you a house at all unless you've signed a buyer broker agreement. And I want to give you the information you need so that that doesn't become handcuffs preventing you from picking the agent that you really want to work with, because you shouldn't just work with the first agent you come across. You should be able to interact with them for a while before you make a longer term commitment to working with them. And I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think any agent should give you a hard time for that being something you want to do. All right. So as we normally do, we're going to go ahead and cover the numbers for May and look for changes. The whole goal here is to kind of get calibrated to where the market is at, where we've been prior to that month and leading up, and then maybe do a little crystal ball gazing and see if we can't figure out where we might be going this year. There's definitely some changes. So let's go ahead and jump into that. But let's get my face out of the way there. There we go. All right. So this is where we always start. We have the total homes on the market, and think of this as the total number of homes buyers have to choose from. They're the market they have to choose from, the inventory they have to choose from. And for you sellers, think of this as the competition number. How many homes are you competing against to try to get sold? That's what this is. And as we look at this, what we're looking at is the number of homes last year versus the number of homes this year. So this is eliminating all seasonal stuff, right? Where if we're looking at June, we're looking at June of last year. If we're looking at May, we're looking at May of last year, because that way we're not a month-to-month comparison can be good to spot trends. But it is, if you're trying to get a feeling for where we are, it's always better to look at the data from the previous year. So as we jump in, we can see in Santa Clara County overall, we have 1,741 homes on the market, which is a 54% increase from the same time last year, which was 1,127. So that's huge. The fact that we're seeing much bigger inventory is a good thing. It'll hopefully help to level out the market a little bit, because inventory has been where we've been weak. Demand has far outpaced inventory, and we'll see where we go with this, but I feel like that's leveling out. And one thing we can talk about once we finish the numbers is a recent transaction that I just finished where the data was very interesting in terms of what that data indicated should happen and then what actually happened. So I'll try not to forget about that one before we finish. Next, let's look at San Jose. 816 homes on the market this year in May. 491 homes last year. That's a 66% increase. In Morgan Hill, we saw a 30% increase, 78 homes on the market this year, 60 homes last year. And in Gilroy, we saw the smallest increase, 72 homes this year, 68 homes last year, again, with just a 6% increase. Next, we will take a look at how many homes got added to the market. And we can see there was a 49% increase just in the month, right? So 2,021 people decided to put their home on the market in May of 2024 versus last year when it was 1,357. So that's a 49% increase. Again, a bigger increase in San Jose, 56%. That was 1,009 homes added to the market, homes that were added to that were listed in the month versus 691 last year. Morgan Hill, 91 this year, 65 last year. That's a 40% increase, and only a 10% increase for Gilroy. 58 homes last year, 64 homes this year. Now, let's take a look at a big number, the total number of homes that sold. And one thing I like to do as we look at this is pay attention to, did we sell all of the homes we listed, or did we add homes to the overall inventory to be accumulated for next month? So we'll talk about that as well as we go through these numbers. Now, homes sold also increased, up 15% in Santa Clara County. 1,146 last year, 1,317 this year. San Jose, California also saw a 15% increase, 561 last year, 647 this year. Morgan Hill, 16% decrease in the total number of homes sold. 51 last year, 43 this year. And same thing in Gilroy, 18% drop, 40 homes last year, 33 homes this year. And remember, we saw increases in inventory. So what's going on? What accounts for this decline in the total number of homes sold? Now, to sort of answer the question I threw out there at the beginning, did we add homes to inventory, or did we sell all of the homes that were listed and then eat into the existing inventory from the previous month? And in every location, we added to inventory. So we added 704 homes to the inventory overall for Santa Clara County. We added 362 in San Jose, we added 48 in Morgan Hill, and we added 31 in Gilroy. So overall, the month of May contributed to an overall increase in inventory that will carry on into June, right? Normally at this time of year, as we're in May and we're in June, these are the 2 months. June is historically the peak, right? That's when you tend to see things going for the highest amount of money. And the reason for that is that tends to be when you see the largest number of homes going into contract in May that then close in June at the highest prices. The numbers we're seeing here for a May, we'll see how it compares time over time, but this is not what I would have expected in this time of year. We would have expected increases in the total number of homes sold, even compared to last year, since we saw it happening in the county overall. So there's clearly a disconnect between the broader market of Santa Clara County and what's happening here in the South County in Morgan Hill and Gilroy. Now, let's take a look at the total months of inventory. This one's also an interesting one, and it's one we track not all the time, but when I think it's more relevant, and I think it is more relevant right now. And this is if you were to freeze the total inventory numbers, or how many homes are available for sale, and then you froze the number of homes that are selling per month and carried on forward, how many months would it take to sell off that inventory? That's what this number tells us. And it's up across the board. So what does that tell us? It tells us homes are staying on the market longer, inventory is going up, and sales are not reaching the levels where we would see the inventory being lowered by that, right? So right now we have 1.3 months of inventory. That's a 30% increase from last year's 1 month in Santa Clara County. Very comparable. San Jose had 0.9 months last year, which with a 44% increase this year to 1.3. Next, Morgan Hill had 1.2 last year for a 50% increase of 1.8 this year. Gilroy had 1.7 last year and 2.2 months this year for a 29% increase. So to calibrate yourself to what this number even means, the lower the number, the more of a seller's market it is. Nationally, folks tend to think of a balanced market as 4.5, 5.5 months of inventory. Clearly, we are not there. I think here a balanced market is more around 4 months. But again, we're not anywhere near that. And the closest is Gilroy. But I think we're definitely feeling it in the ground truth of what is selling. And it's also very much an influence of where you are on the price band. If you're at a super high luxury level home, if you're at for instance, average prices in Morgan Hill, $1.5, $1.4 million. If you're at the 1.6, 1.7, 1.8 or higher, you're getting a very different feel happening in the market than you are at that average price or below it. So it's something to keep in mind if you're a buyer trying to figure out what your strategy should be, or if you're a seller who's trying to figure out where your home will fit into the marketplace. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the homes that went pending. So this means the sellers accepted an offer in this month, in the month of May. How many were there? In Santa Clara County, we saw a total increase of 14%. Last year it was 1,177, 1,347 this year. San Jose saw, again, a 14% increase, very much on par with what we saw in the county. 576 homes last year, 657 this year. Check out Morgan Hill and Gilroy. As we have seen with the total number of homes sold, which indicates the number of homes that went pending the previous month. So in April, obviously there were lower homes that went pending in Morgan Hill and Gilroy, which fed lower sold homes in the month of May. But now what we're showing is that June is likely to give us more of the same in terms of sales numbers, homes sold numbers that aren't what we would expect for this time of year. Morgan Hill's down 9%. 54 homes went pending last year in May versus 49 this year in May. And Gilroy, 40 homes versus 38. And because of the sample size, I think we can call that a wash. Once you get into smaller sample sizes, like handfuls of homes, it's not as truly indicative or reliable as you get when you're getting thousands in your sample size. But down 5% in Gilroy if we're just focusing right on what the numbers are that we're seeing. So that's the crystal ball moment. This is where we are looking into what do we expect next month in terms of homes sold for these areas. We can expect an increase in Santa Clara County overall in San Jose and a decrease in Morgan Hill and Gilroy. All right, next. Average original list price. Now, this is one that I focus on, and I don't know anyone else who really does, but the reason I do is because I want to get an idea. I want to take a look into the minds of sellers. What are expectations on the part of sellers? And that's what this number is. This is the amount of money that the seller agreed to list their home for. So when it went into the MLS, that very first asking price was this. This is that average number. And we can see that aside from Morgan Hill, pretty much across the board, everybody had higher expectations for what their home should sell for versus the average for last year. Now, it was up 6.3% overall in Santa Clara County, going from $1,878,000 to $1,996,000, so just shy of $2 million in Santa Clara County overall. In San Jose, last year, $1,426,000 in May of 2024, $1,503,000 for a 5.4% increase. In Morgan Hill, down 5%. which is, I think, is great. If mentally sellers are calibrated on average to a lower price, I think that makes sense given what's happening in the marketplace. But very odd for this time of year when you would expect folks are jumping in the market. They would expect to get highest price for their property. 1.6 million last year, 1,557,000 this year for a 5% decline. Gilroy up 19%, 1.1 million versus 1,364,000. So folks in Gilroy expecting a little bit more, but given the market in Gilroy, this is also representative of some homes at the higher price point that have come onto the market in Gilroy, which again, because of the small sample size, can skew it. But if a buyer is out there looking at the marketplace, this is what they're faced with. They're faced with homes that are priced like this on average. Next, let's take a look at average sales price. And then what we're going to look at is what can we see of what was expected versus what was delivered. In other words, comparing that expected price, that original list price, to what homes are actually selling for. And we'll see how out of whack some markets are here. Now, in Santa Clara County, things are up 12.2% from the same time last year. Homes selling for $1,816,000 last year. On average, homes selling for $2,036,000 in the county this year. Overall, that is $39,991 above expectations, meaning that on average, homes sold for more than the average list price. In San Jose, $1,390,000 last year, $1,594,000 this year, for a 14.7% increase. Again, sellers getting higher numbers than their expectations. So, but to the tune of $91,079. So that's a pretty wonderful number, right? Morgan Hill, 20.8% increase in the same time last year. $1,284,000 last year, $1,551,000 this year. However, it was off from expectations. If you compare what homes were listing for versus what they sold for, homes were selling $5,885 below expectations in Morgan Hill. In Gilroy, a wash, really, just a 0.3% increase. Last year, $1,235,000. This year, $1,240,000. However, versus expectations on average, that is a $124,886 loss from expectations, the average expectations in Gilroy. So definitely a delta there. And again, I know that sounds like a shocking number, but again, remember sample size. A very high-priced home can skew this one way or the other. But again, it's just based on what buyers are seeing and sellers are seeing in the marketplace. So I think it's still worth it to look at this number, but also understand that it can be thrown one direction or another pretty easily by just one or two listings. Next, let's take a look at percent over or under asking price. Now, this one is a way of looking into the brains of buyers. What were buyers able to do or willing to do when faced with the list price at the time they made their offer? So this is not percent of original asking price. This is percent of what the asking price was at the time that it sold. So if the price was raised or the price was lowered, we're not taking that into account here. We're taking into account what was the buyer faced with, what price was on the house at the time they made their offer, and then this is what it ended up selling for. So we can see that last year in Santa Clara County, 104.6%, which basically means that homes were selling for 4.6% over asking price. This year in May, 107.8, which means 7.8% above asking price is what folks were getting in Santa Clara County overall, which is nuts. But let's take a look at San Jose, which is more nuts. 104.5 last year, so less last year than the county overall, at 4.5% above asking price. However, in May of 2024, 108.2, so 8.2% over asking price in San Jose on average. That's a 3.7% shift from the same time last year, and that all equals dollars in the pockets of sellers. So clearly, San Jose is seeing multiple offer scenarios to the tune of 8.2%. So that's crazy. But that's one that's not even one market. That's one mega market. San Jose has tons of submarkets that perform differently than this. So if your home happens to have a San Jose address, don't assume this necessarily applies to you. This is This is one of those markets that's so gigantic that you really have to focus on the submarkets. It's all about the neighborhoods in San Jose. Next, we go to Morgan Hill, where it was a 2.4% in delta from last year, but last year it was 100.1, so only 0.1% over asking. This year, 2.5% over asking, which is on par. It's what I was seeing in some of the transactions I was involved with. I had a few that were higher than that, but in general terms, that was good. What's interesting is in Gilroy, this number went down. It was 102.4 last year. It was 102 this year. That's a 0.4% drop from last year. And again, reflects what we've been saying about Gilroy for a long time, that Gilroy does represent, I think, one of those areas of opportunity for buyers that are looking to get into something to adapt to interest rates and pay a little bit less overall, but not adjust what you want out of your house, simply because the sticker prices are going to be lower in Gilroy. And there are some areas that are amazing. Northwest Gilroy is amazing. Northeast Gilroy is also amazing, but that's more like estates. That's like acreage, but some beautiful homes there. And for a lot of folks, that commute up to Silicon Valley or up to the city isn't that big of a deal because they're not even working every day at the office. A lot of the folks I've been helping find homes over the last 6 months only need to go into the office once a week. So they were willing to trade a little bit more of a commute for a little bit more of affordability. Next, let's take a look at the total days on market. Now, across the board, this number's down. 19 days last year, 14 days this year for a 26% drop in Santa Clara County overall. San Jose, 28% drop, 18 days last year, 13 days this year. Morgan Hill is one of the markets where, interestingly enough, while the number's down from last year, from 26 to 23, that number is still high enough that is a indicator of lower buyer demand, or at least a lower volume of buyers shopping in the market. If this number was down in the teens, then we could argue all these numbers that are like 14 and 13, those are there simply because realtors made people wait to make offers. Typically, when an agent puts a listing on the MLS, they're going to ask for 10 to 14 days before they'll entertain offers. They want one or two open houses to be in there so plenty of people see it, so when the time comes, they get plenty of offers. My personal experience totally bears this out. And this number, depending on the price range of your home, this number goes up or down, right? Obviously, the lower the price, your days on market goes down, unless it's the artificially imposed 10 to 14 days. And if it's a higher priced home, this number goes up. I had a home sell first week in June, but it was above that average price. It was closer to $2 million, and it took longer than 23 days to get it sold. Other properties that I was involved with in this same market in Morgan Hill had fewer days, but they were lower priced. So Morgan Hill is a little bit more sensitive right now in terms of this number, but also in terms of, as we saw, the amount above asking price that's being offered. Gilroy saw a decrease of 30%, 23 days last year, 16 days this year. So they're seeing a little bit more activity in terms of how quickly their homes are selling. And again, I think the interest rates for loans, I think the affordability of the homes in general, I think that's drawing more buyers down. And that kind of makes sense to me. So, and frankly, I advise an awful lot of folks who are trying to walk that line between how much they can spend and how much they can get out of a home to consider Gilroy as an option. I think it's a great place. And Christopher High School is great. That's the school that serves the northwest area of Gilroy. My next door neighbor is the former principal of Christopher High School. She's great. And we talk frequently about educational things and what's going on. She still consults and does all kinds of other things relating to the school district. So she's great. And she loves Christopher High School, but of course she does. I hope everyone still has their coffee with them. I've been working on this one all morning. It's been a long morning already. All right. Now, we have completed our survey of... Oh, no, we haven't. We got one more slide. Sorry. Oh, no, we don't. Okay, we do jump right into this. So now we're going to look over our shoulders and see the month-to-month stuff so we can spot trends. And so that we can also spot what was the trend in previous years at the same time, so that we can use that as a metric to see if we can't figure out what's coming. So you can see here in May, we've got total active listings and dramatic increase, right? From March until May. And this is all Santa Clara County data because we want to take the biggest sample size, because as we're looking at bigger trends, we want to get big sample sizes. All right. So we can see we've been on a pretty steady increase since December, with a little bit of a blip between February and March, but again, just a dramatic increase. If we look at the same time last year, super flat, right? And if we look at last year, definitely a steady increase from December, from a lower point to a higher point, or actually right on par, right? We're seeing almost the exact same numbers from 2 years ago, from 2022. And it peaked in June, July, which is actually pretty normal, right? As we see things coming onto the market and we see a little bit of an accumulation. One thing that's interesting to note, though, is that frequently what we end up seeing in, say, July, and I think that the total inventory numbers kind of reflect this, is we start to see that June, July timeframe, we start to see more homes selling than are listed, which then really feeds on dropping that overall inventory. We'll see what happens. So what would be our expectation? Well, last year there was a little bit of an increase. The year before that there was a dramatic increase. I would say that we will see an increase more on par with 2022 than we saw in 2023. I don't think it'll be flat. I don't think there's any indicator that there's people just not going onto the marketplace. I think there's a strong indicator that many more sellers are deciding to join the marketplace. And we'll see how that plays out. We've talked a lot about interest rates and the fact that so many people have interest rates below 4% that are really kind of enthusiastically holding on to those for good reason. I mean, I happen to be in that group with an interest rate hovering right around 3%. I think it was 2.9, something like that. But that's a great interest rate versus 6 point whatever or 7 point whatever, depending on what your situation is. Next, let's take a look at total new listings. Now, new listings slowed a little bit between April and May, but man, just jumped from December. If we look at last year, still an increase, but not anything crazy, right? Then we saw a steady decrease from May forward into July. But let's take a look at 2022. Now, this is one of those things that I think is interesting simply because this was the truth for not only 2022, but several of the years prior, where the number of homes that were coming on the market was happening in the first couple of months. In this case, it was March, where we actually saw more homes come on the market in March than we saw come on the market in May and June. And that's something that it wasn't just weird in 2022. It was a weird thing that happened in other previous years as more sellers jumped onto the marketplace, and very much before interest rates went up, right? So we had at the beginning, what was it, March of 2022 is when interest rates started to make their jump. And I think that what happened there also, the reason why we peaked in March, that is beyond the reasons why before, was because sellers didn't want to become buyers as interest rates went up. But interest rates didn't really get crazy until later in 2022, right? Or after July, things were at levels that were just nuts. So what do we expect coming up? Well, because of the dynamics that happened in 2022, I would maybe not lean into that. But I would expect new listings to continue to go up in June, despite what happened in 2023. The market now is acting a little differently, and I think there's other things at play that make this a reality. But I think we'd expect an increase in June, and I think we maybe peak in June and see new listings sort of drop off after June. Next, let's take a look at total number of homes sold. We can see we've got a pretty big increase from April to May this year, with really the start in January. So homes were just really starting to sell. We saw last year, January, things started to go up, and then things went down a little bit in April, and then went up again in May, went flat, and then declined a bit starting in July. That's a little weird. Usually what you'll find is, because remember, the homes sold number lags by 30 days because escrow has to close. So a home that you see closing in July actually got into contract in June. So normally what we see is sales strong or homes going pending strong right until July, which then pushes homes sold number to at least August. If we look at 2022, we can see that the home sales just dropped. And again, interest rates are the primary explainer of that one. So it's a little bit difficult to look into the crystal ball on what we'll see. Personally, I think it's going to go up, continue to go up. I think homes are going to continue to sell. And I think that'll be the trend right up through June and July. I think we'll peak in July and then start to see that decrease in August. It's a little bit more of the classic model of what happened for decades in the real estate market of how things went. But we'll see how that goes. In terms of pending, we can see pendings in general have been trending up since December. Last year, we saw the same thing, December with a peak in May. And then in May of 2022, we saw things actually decline. We had tons of pendings in March that then declined all the way until July and then peaked in August. But again, and remember, March is the month when interest rates started to increase. So it's interesting that they didn't go up dramatically. They didn't jump 4 points in March, but they did go up. So I think what we saw is a lot of drop off in pendings simply because we just saw the increases in interest rates. So where do I expect this to go? Where do I expect pendings to go? I'm kind of leaning into the idea that some classic numbers are going to happen here. So I think we see homes going pending right into late June. June might be our peak, but maybe even a relatively flat relationship between June and July as folks want to get those homes sold before August hits and folks are going back to school. Next, let's take a look at list versus sales price. Now, again, this is original list price. So this is expectations versus what they actually sold for. We can see that we've got average sales prices exceeding average list price right now. And they've been kind of neck and neck with each other since March of 2024. If we look at May of 2023, we can see that list price was originally a little bit higher than sales price. So things were a little reversed and things were really neck and neck, really right at the same point in May of 2022. Where do I expect these to go? I would expect them to continue to stay neck and neck. And just because of the crazy numbers we're seeing in terms of selling for over asking price in the county overall in San Jose, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see that. It'll be interesting to see what happens with inventory numbers because inventory has dramatically gone up. And obviously in some areas in Santa Clara County and San Jose, demand remains high, or we wouldn't see the numbers we're seeing in terms of people paying over asking. But it's going to be interesting to see how long that lasts. If we continue to accumulate inventory at some point, because I wouldn't have expected us to accumulate inventory in May as much as we did, and the numbers indicating we will in June as well, which is even more odd, and I believe we will in July as well, which is even more odd. So if we continue to accumulate, at some point the inventory outstretches the demand, and then you start to see prices go down. But I'm hesitant to call that one yet. Next, percent of asking price. And again, we're going to see some where our peaks and our valleys are, and I think the peaks are sort of where you would expect them to be. If you look back to March of 22, gee, what a surprise. That's where the peak is. And things started to quickly drop off as interest rates took their increase for a ride. We are now at a new increase from that time period where we hit 109 as a hit on April, 107.8 this May. So with that, because you can see the trend, right? Once you hit a high and then have a lower month, you don't tend to see it increase from there. My guess would be that this number, this percent of asking price, continues to drop right on into the end of the year, where it'll bottom out probably in November, December, if historically the historical performance continues to play out. Next, Santa Clara County days on market. Let's see, we've got pretty much on par performance. It's been relatively flat from April to May. April to May of last year was the same, with then decreases in June. And then in 2022, we saw a increase between April and May, and then another increase between May and June. Not going to consider 2022 as the year to look at, simply again because of interest rates. I would expect days on market to, just considering where we are and what tends to happen, I would expect days on market to stay flat for the next 3 months. So June, July, August. And then it wouldn't surprise me if we start to see an uptick in September, if we're going with, again, believing the historical model is what we're going to get. Now, finally, these are the numbers for how many homes had price reductions in May of 2024. And we can see that in Santa Clara County last month, 19% of homes had a price reduction. This month, 21%. And that's a 57% increase from the same time last year. So more homes this year compared to last year are having their prices reduced. Still, it's not a huge number. Nationally, the number I think is 30-something percent, 33%. San Jose last month, 18%. This month, 19%, which is a 60% increase from the same time last year. Morgan Hill, 26% last month. So fewer this month than last month are doing price reductions. But the overall is up 14% from the same time last year. I actually think this number goes up for Morgan Hill, given the increase in inventory and the reduction in sales, the competition that's going to bring in, and the fact that just things aren't jumping in Morgan Hill. I think that to get sold, if folks want to do it this selling season, they're going to have to reduce their price. That's just kind of basic math. Gilroy, 18% last month, 28% this month, so a huge increase, plus an 82% increase from the same time last year. So given the average expectations of sellers in Gilroy in terms of higher asking prices, my guess is this number is going to go up as well. In order to get sold, sellers are going to have to reduce their price. And I think what we had here was a bunch of sellers who came on the market thinking that since we're in that time of the year, I'll go for my max dollar number and throw it out there and see if I can't get it. So I think that's kind of where we are with these numbers. It's going to be interesting to see where things go. Again, I expect to see an increase in Gilroy, an increase in Morgan Hill in terms of the total number of homes that have price reductions. And I would expect to see flat or maybe a little bit of an increase in Santa Clara County overall and San Jose. So take that for what it's worth. One thing I wanted to do as sort of a little commentary is give you a little ground truth on what I've been seeing. I do a lot of number tracking, right? Everything that I do, I try to do it in a way that I can track it. So I have a tiered marketing plan for each property that I do. There's obviously some core stuff that always happens. And then there are things that I will do that are customized for that property based on what kind of property it is, what it has to offer. And I try to identify who is the most likely buyer of this home and what does that person look like and what are their needs, right? And then I try to customize up marketing. And so what I'll do is I'll do direct mail pieces, I'll do email pieces, I'll do advertising on different websites, I'll do flyers at specific places. Like a good example is a couple of years ago, I had a home that, given what it was priced at and its proximity to the airfield down here, I did a ton of marketing to all of the various airfields all the way up the peninsula to find pilots who were spending an awful lot of time or awful lot of money putting their plane somewhere, having a hangar rented like in Palo Alto or San Jose or wherever it was. And that worked out great. I ended up selling that house to a pilot who now rents a hangar at the San Martin airfield. But anyway, my point is, every one of those has a specific URL. So if you are someone who is receiving my general marketing, that has a separate URL with a QR code associated with that direct mail piece for you to visit. If you are someone who is what I call a move-up potential buyer for one of my listings, meaning I have a 4-bedroom house for sale, you have a 2-bedroom house, or you're a renter, but your overall income indicates that this is a home you could afford and wouldn't be drawn to, that has a separate URL in the direct mail piece you'll get. And I'll usually do 5 or 6 of these specific things for each listing that I get. And I find that gets me way more eyeballs on my properties than most people do, because most people just go on the MLS, they do a just listed announcement, and then they're done. And that's just where I start. It goes a lot further than that. All right, so having laid the groundwork so you understand that, I get all this data that comes in and I plot it all out in my little magical spreadsheet. And from that, from past experience, I extrapolate, here's what I should expect. This is how many viewings I should get. This is how many phone calls I should get. This is how many realtors should reach out to me to get more information on behalf of a client. There's also stuff like there are websites that you can use that will track how much attention it's getting on Zillow, how much attention it's getting on Realtor.com and on Trulia. There's a bunch of different ones that'll do this for you. And I had a listing, and all of that data was suggesting that this home should sell for in X amount of days with X amount over asking price, or less that, because that data is derived from how many actual inquiries I get. But based on the number of people selling it, sharing it, saving it, all the traffic that it was generating, all the calls I was getting, all the attention it was getting, it suggested that a higher price and a shorter days on market was going to happen. And that didn't happen. What I found was interest was way up here, but actions, the taking the final step of submitting an offer, was lagging. All the other data suggested I should be getting tons of offers, and I wasn't. So, and I knew it was priced appropriately. We actually priced it relatively aggressively, very much compared. In fact, when appraisal time came, it appraised for over what the asking price was. So what that told me was people liked the property, but couldn't accommodate it for some other reason. And of course, interest rates was the thing. And the thing that I finally drilled down to was the week before we went on the market was when we saw interest rates take a huge jump. They went from like 6.9 to 7.3 or something like that, or in a relatively short period of time. So what's interesting is these little micro changes in the markets can dramatically change what kind of expectations you might have for your listing. Now, I'm pretty transparent in terms of what I'm seeing with my clients. So I let them know, hey, when we first talked about this, these were the indicators of what was going to happen with your property. Given that we just saw interest rates go up, and the fact that we're now 2 weeks into this, and all my data indicates we should be getting our doors blown off with people coming in with offers, this is what I think happened. So for you real estate agents out there, communicate more. The one thing I hear from clients who have complaints about past experiences with real estate agents is the lack of communication. But the other thing is pay attention. I'll start having conversations like this with other real estate agents, and they're not involved in doing that at all. And I think if you're going to be a professional in this, you need to be. You need to be able to drill down into what's going on with the market. All right. Anyway, sorry. That's my soapbox for the day. All right, so let's go ahead. We can jump in and start covering some of these articles. But let me also do the whole personal promo thing. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the beginning of the live chat, I'm a licensed real estate broker. I started in 1988. Started off in Mountain View, Palo Alto area. I've worked all over the county. I consider myself to be pretty darn good at this stuff. But one thing I like to offer is tools that are actually tools. So one thing I would like to suggest for all of my folks out there, well, if you want to start your home search, you can do that right here and just kick things off. If you are interested in selling your home or just getting a really good tool to track your home, I'm going to suggest you give this a try. Now, everybody under the sun is offering the what's my home worth instant thing, right? So you can come here and you can do your whole, you can do that. You can start entering your address. You can pick your address and it'll tell you immediately what the estimated value of your home is with a little bit of a history, right? But it won't give you any of this other information. And that's where the tool part comes in. So I want to deliver on the free, no obligation, what's your home worth instant value thing. And that's what this does. But in addition to that, in addition to the home value estimator, which you get without having to give me any information, because I want to give you information that you want without putting a lot of strings on it. One thing is there is a ton of actual tools that you can use as a homeowner, not a home seller, as a homeowner, that's included with this that I think is an amazing tool. And every single year I do a review of the technology I have. I came across this one that's powered by HomeBot a couple of years ago, and it's by far the best. You've got you can personalize this home equity tool that gives you all various ways you could tap into equity on your home. If your house has built-in, it knows how much equity you've got. If you give it more information on your loan scenario, it can give you all kinds of ideas on what you can do to tap that. If you have what home purchase options might be, if you want to purchase a new home, buy an investment property, rent your home, buy another, sell and pocket the cash, all of that kind of wonderful stuff. Refinance calculator. Does it make sense to refinance? And not only does it give you the ability to calculate it, it tells you whether or not you should do it, right? X, don't do it. Don't do it. It's suggesting you not. But it'll also tell you if you overpay your mortgage by a certain amount, how much does that save you? If you want to do your mortgage summary and figure out what you've paid so far, get an idea of your equity and where you stand there. Other options like thinking of selling, there's 3 strong selling signals in your market. You might have up to 1.44 million in purchasing power for a new home. You could use about 144,000 of equity to feel more ready for a storm, like for emergency funds. Net worth, home renting tool. These are all part of this tool, and they're just things that I've always advised my clients to do a yearly review of their property. This does all of it at one click and gives you an update every month on what your current home value is. So I think it's a great tool. And not if you have no interest in ever selling your home, I think this is a great tool for you. And the great thing is, if you decide you want to exercise one of these, you can click it. And I've partnered with a local lender who can give you real world numbers on what getting that second loan or financing that investment purchase would be. And they're right here local. So it's not going to be some crazy internet thing or somebody in Southern California. This is somebody right here in our Bay Area home turf that you can have a conversation with. And it's all clickable right there as you use it. So that's my plug for my stuff. Feel free to take advantage of it if you like. And if you do want to check out the podcast, this is where it is. I'm pretty proud of some of the stuff here in terms of its ratings. It gets great ratings in terms of folks thinking it's a good show. So hopefully you'll get something out of it. But I always try to keep it super relevant, and you can see the most recent show is the NAR settlement, and it focuses just on how it's going to affect buyers and sellers. Okay, next, let's hit this one. 87% of outstanding mortgage debt has a sub 6% rate. So one thing that is going to be drawing people to staying in their homes longer, and has been now for years, is going to be this reality. More favorable conditions than last year in May as inventory picked up rather significantly, climbing 35.2% year over year. In the fourth quarter of 2023, 22.2% of outstanding mortgages had an interest rate below 3%. I just thought that was an interesting one. It's a data point to keep in mind as you're trying to figure out where inventory is going to go. This means that more than half of outstanding mortgages have a rate of 4% or lower. So I think that's an interesting one to note. In terms of weekly numbers, the trend, I think, is the thing. New listings were up 8% year over year. And remember, that's nationally 8%. But what did we see locally? In the county, we saw 54% increase. Excuse me. We saw a 49% increase in new listings. In terms of active listings, 36% increase nationally, and we saw a 54% increase. 2 days slower to get homes sold, less time to get homes sold compared to the same time last year for us. So national trend, it's taking a little bit longer, and active listings or inventory is going up pretty quickly. We're not seeing the time on market being affected yet, but we are seeing an increase in the total active listings. It's just a question of whether or not that can outstrip demand. I wanted to throw this one your way. Top 10 U.S. housing markets least at risk of declines in 2024, and I thought it was interesting that none of these are in California. Tennessee, we've talked a lot about. So, and I think it's interesting that Tennessee appears on this list 3 times, and I'm willing to bet that these 3 counties border each other. Maybe not. Maybe one of them is where Chattanooga is, and then the other ones are around Charlottesville. But anyway, This is another one we were looking at. Higher risk of housing market slowdown continues in California, New Jersey, and Illinois, according to the data from ATTOM. Interestingly enough, the counties where they think this has the highest probability are not ours. It's not Santa Clara County. It's mostly extreme Northern California and some Southern California. So in the 14 in California include Butte County, which is Chico, El Dorado County, where I lived for a little while when I lived in the town of Cool. It's up near Auburn. It's up where Auburn is, which is outside Sacramento. Humboldt County, which is Eureka. Solano County, outside Sacramento. Yolo County. And congrats to a friend of my oldest son, Kyle, who is just got an internship at the district attorney's office for Yolo County, outside Sacramento. Good on him. Glad he's a good friend of my son, and he's also been a good kid. And I love seeing these guys succeed. In the northern part of the state, Fresno County, Kern County. Got a ticket in Kern County once and fought it and won. Kings County, outside Fresno. Madera County, outside Fresno. Merced County. San Joaquin County. Stanislaus County. Tulare. In Central California. Another one, San Bernardino County, is in Southern California. Let's see. Highest percentages in the 50 most at-risk markets were in Kings County, Brooklyn, but also El Dorado County. So what does that mean? Why do I point these out? Highest risk of housing market slowdown for someone who's looking to buy, I think, indicates an opportunity, right? So I would totally invest in some of these areas that I'm familiar with, like El Dorado County. There's some of these areas outside Sacramento, Yolo County. I would totally consider investing in one of those areas. So if you're someone who's in the local Bay Area and you want something that's within driving range, I think this spells a potential opportunity for you in those counties where there might be windows of opportunity to purchase at a discount from what we've historically been used to. Federal Reserve keeps the rate at 5.25 to 5.5. Just the interest rates are not being increased; they're kind of being held where they are. Again, this is what we're going to see in terms of mortgage rates is more tied to the 10-year Treasury. This is zero down mortgages. This is one I've talked about a lot on the podcast. Zero down mortgages are just a ridiculously bad idea, simply because if things go upside down. Now, this one's a little interesting. This is from United Wholesale Mortgage. They have a zero down program that they rolled out in May. Borrowers can get a 3% down payment assistance loan up to $15,000. This second loan will not accrue interest or have a monthly payment. Instead, the loan has to be paid back in full if the home is sold, the mortgage is paid off, or the borrower refinances. So it's a little bit of a different take. You still have to pay. This doesn't stop PMI, right? So you have to get PMI insurance. Homeowners who want to take advantage of this program will need to be at or below 80% of the property address's area median income, or be a first-time buyer. So they need to be either a first-time buyer, which is fine, or they need to be financially disadvantaged, which is bad, because if the market turns and suddenly they're upside down and they owe more on the property than it's worth, we know statistically from the last time we went through this that those folks are the first ones to abandon the loan. So that would be unfun, but it definitely sets the stage. And we also need to understand that in addition to goofy decisions like this, which obviously isn't industry-wide, this is obviously a very focused thing. One thing that we need to realize, and again, this is a podcast topic you can go and find if you like, we have very much weakened what a credit review is, what a credit rating is, right? Things that used to be a negative on your credit report that should be are no longer, like defaults on medical bills and things like that. Things that shouldn't be a bonus to your credit are, like your phone bill. Your phone's a service. That's not a credit relationship. If you stop paying your phone bill, they turn off your phone, right? So not sure. The logic there was to increase credit ratings so that more people could qualify. So instead of skewing the equation from the we'll give you a 0% loan side, they skewed it from the you'll qualify for a regular loan because your credit rating increased. And a few years ago, some of you may have noticed this. I did a podcast on it at the time. There was a huge news thing that kind of made it across the whole country about how we'd seen this dramatic increase in credit ratings. as good as news, right? Great, everybody's credit rating has gone up. Well, if you looked at it, you realized it was because they had skewed how this number was being calculated, and this was an artificial increase. This was not because the story wasn't, here is new training on financial management that we've been giving to the general population, and here's the result. It was simply magically poof, credit ratings have gone up. And if you looked at it, you realized no. Just the way we're measuring credit ratings, right? And that any system tends to do that, right? Whether we're talking about high school with social promotion instead of actually basing things on grades versus realities, that's what we had here. And you put those things two together, where we do some of the things that were dumb the first time around, but without the limiters of real credit ratings. If you mix really bad credit ratings with really bad lending policies, that's a double whammy, right? So it sets the stage, I think, for an even bigger crash than we may have had last time. Next, U.S. added 272,000 jobs in May. Unemployment rate rises to 4%. And I think one thing that's interesting is to note, particularly this one, which is wage growth, which is down, but also the kinds of jobs that were created. And the reason why I'm sharing this data, right? Unemployment influences home purchasing, right? But it also influences home selling. So what we saw was in terms of careers, jobs that are an actual career, we saw a decrease in that. But in terms of super low, not career style jobs, we saw an increase in that. So overall, not a good job scenario in terms of unemployment rates overall, but also the types of jobs we did see happen weren't good jobs. They weren't career jobs. And even my son who graduated, my youngest son, who graduated with a computer science degree, which has historically been considered kind of a bulletproof degree, right? We're finding locally it is exceedingly difficult to find a job, whether you're talking about Google, Facebook, Apple, Intel. The only things I'm hearing from folks out there is that you maybe can get a contractor position in one of those places, but full-time positions, a lot of these places are on either silent or admitted hiring freezes. So why do I mention this? How do you get people to sell a home? Well, if it's at their discretion and the only thing they're thinking is I don't want to become a buyer because I don't want to pay the interest rate. The other thing is financial stress. Excuse me. So if we get ourselves into a scenario where more and more people are feeling financial stress because their income just simply isn't satisfactory to address their debt, regardless of whether or not it's low-cost debt or high-cost debt, at some point that breaks and they have to consider selling their highest value asset. And if we're talking about a job problem, that I think opens the door to a lot of options. Like, okay, well, if my job is at risk here, then maybe I need to even be willing to relocate to find a job. So I think that potentially things like this can feed not only a drop in buyers, right, but it can also feed a increase in sellers. Now you mix those two things together, a decrease in buyers and an increase in sellers, that pushes us into a marketplace where prices come down. Now, how likely do I think this is? What's my level of confidence that this is a thing? I think it's something to watch. Don't think it's going to have any dramatic influence on our market for at least the foreseeable future, for the next 6 months. But I think it's one to watch. I think this is something that's potentially super interesting. Next, weekly initial unemployment claims. This is just another article on the same thing. These guys usually have more interesting graphics. 4-week average of initial claims peaked at 5.25 million in April, and that's obviously a crazy number. But just more data on the previous point. Next, let's go ahead and talk about interest rates. And this is looking at assuming the average sales price of a home in Morgan Hill of $1.5 million with a 20% down, 21%. Boink. Yeah, there we go. 20%. This is what you get offered, right? 6.88%, 6.875%, $7,800 a month, $7,800 a month. This one, $1,590 in fees. But here's something interesting, right? And I like to do this because it clues you into what lenders are thinking. So there was a time when at 20%, you'd get an entire page of options. So lenders were all in for that proposition. But let's pretend for a moment that lenders have, for some strange reason, a little bit more concern about property values versus what people are paying. In a scenario like that, you want more money down. You want that more secure, more money down. So let's go ahead and boost this up to 30% and see what changes. Wow. Look at the number of lenders that suddenly jump. We doubled the number of lenders that were available to us. Why do I point this out? This indicates a far more cautious lending environment. But let's understand how banks work. Banks only make money when money is moving. They only make money when they are funding loans, right? So banks don't want to not loan you money, right? They simply want to make sure to loan it under terms that won't hose them. But we see here's 6.49%, zero fees, but you got to put in 30%. Or maybe 25%. I don't know. We just jumped from 20 to 30. Let's see if this still exists at 25. But my point is that you're with more money down. See there. So at 25%, they'll still do it. So definitely interesting and definitely savings, right? And so this indicates caution. This is lenders saying, and see, so 25 to 30% seems to be the magic number. If you go to 25%, that seems to be where lenders would like to see you right now. Not 20%, not the universally accepted for decades number of 20%. They want to see a little bit more skin in the game. We're only getting 3 lenders here. So I think that's interesting. And keep in mind that if you're someone who's buying, if you don't leave this as an unasked question to your lender. Well, what if I put down 25%? What can you do for me then? Right? Ask that question, because I think you may be surprised by the fact that short term, it may obviously cost you more money, but it may save you money long term, because if you're suddenly talking about getting a loan at 6.5% versus 7.125 or 6.7, that feels worth it to me. So check that option out. See if it's something that you might want to entertain. Okay. I think that's it. If you're interested in joining, I've got a meetup group for this, for the California Coffee and Real Estate for buyers, sellers, investors, all welcome. I've never mentioned this before on the show, but if this is something that you would like to participate on, feel free to head on over and join. I think if you're following on Facebook, that's fine too. But if you feel like joining here, you can do that. So just thought I'd let everybody know that that's there as an option. Okay. That's about it, folks. I do appreciate you coming by and seeing what I have to offer here. Hopefully, I've given you some valuable information. Again, my name is Robert Whitelaw, licensed real estate broker since 1988 right here in Santa Clara County. Feel free to find me at soldbyrobert.com, where I've got some great tools for buyers, sellers, and investors. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend and the rest of your coffee today. Get outside. Enjoy some sunshine. Have a good day. And I will talk to you guys next time. Have a good one.